It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 710 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. Another great show lined up for you today. My guest is David Sill. David is Head of Sales Enablement at Discover.org. He's got a big job. They've been doing a lot of acquisitions, so a lot of interesting things to talk about. So what we're going to talk about today is how and why to build a culture of trust in a sales organization. And we're going to talk about how to use this trust to drive the growth and development of the sellers on your team. And we're going to talk about why personal and professional development is really a joint responsibility of both the organization and the individual. And David will share his views on what it takes to motivate individual sellers to make that investment in themselves, to identify the next level in their careers, and find the path to reach it. Now, before we get to David, I want to take a quick second to talk about the Sales House. It is a sales growth accelerator program for B2B sellers. So if you're not completely satisfied with the current trajectory of your sales career, then the Sales House is where you need to be. This is the resource to help you reach the next level in your career, as well as the level above that. Members get unlimited access to our checklists, our playbooks, our courses, coaching, mentoring, as well as an engaged community to help you sell with more confidence, more trust, more acumen, and greater impact. And it's all designed from the beginning to help you succeed in winning more deals. Because our motto in the Sales House is learn more equals earn more. So remember that. Learn more equals earn more. So come learn more and become the best version of you in the Sales House. Visit thesaleshouse.com. That is thesaleshouse.com/join. And we'll see you there. All right, let's jump into it with my guest today, David Sill. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Great to see you again. For our audio audience, I am looking at David while we do this. Or opposite sides of the country. And as we record this, he's in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is going crazy because they just signed Bryce Harper to a contract there in the Philadelphia Phillies. But you had said you're not much of a baseball fan.
Well, it's more that I'm a Pittsburgh guy, so Pittsburgh did that to me. Life, so I pretty much stick to basketball, football, and hockey now.
Okay, so do you take a terrible towel with you everywhere you go?
You're born that way, you stay that way, you don't switch. So yeah, sort of.
All right, do I see that peeking out of your coat there? Yeah. So, all right. Well, we don't want to delve too much into sports here, but we're going to talk a little bit about sales enablement and certain aspects of it, and I guess we're going to talk about culture and trust. I think that's a good topic to get into, because that's certainly a part of enablement is at least in my mind, is are you creating a culture of learning within an organization that inspires people to take not only what the company gives them, but also invest on their own to continue their own development. And it seems like there's this, I don't know, it's a gap. I mean, I see a gap. I see companies sort of paying lip service to development of their individuals, and then individuals saying, well, if the company's not going to invest in me, why would I invest in myself?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a chain of causation, Andy, I would say, when it comes to, you have to try things, right? To be a seller, you have to be willing to try things, and to try things, you have to be okay with failing. And to be okay with failing, you have to be around people that you trust. And so if that trusting culture isn't there, then it sort of shuts the doors for all the things that occur when that trust is there, in terms of being okay, being vulnerable. It reminds me of, I took an elective in undergrad for comedy improv, just because, it just was a time and day of the week that I needed a class, and whatever, it fulfilled the requirement. You know how you do.
Yeah.
And I remember very distinctly that we got there that first day, and everybody in the class kind of had this oh shit moment where it was like, what did we sign up for? This is going to be embarrassing every single week. We're going to be embarrassed in front of everybody.
We're going to have to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Why did I do this? And then because, necessity forces your hand sometimes, and that's good. everybody just had to go put their hand in the middle and say, all right, well, we're all in this together. So I'm not going to look any more stupid than you're going to look. And we're all going to look stupid every single time. But therein was kind of this pact of trust that said, you know what, we'll just let it all hang out in this class, and that'll just be what this class is about. And so it was a really healthy lesson in what happens when you're just willing to let go and be vulnerable and just say, hey man, I don't care. I'm just going to try stuff, and some of it's going to bomb and some of it's going to work, and whatever. I'm okay with those consequences.
All right. Well, there's a couple things in there. Let's touch on. One is it seems like, let's start trust to sort of the more overarching theme here in sales is, I don't see much of it these days in sales in many organizations, and I think it's driven by several factors. And I think some is inexperience of managers. Some of it is some of the tools and technologies we use. Some of the expectations are set and I don't want to sound like a broken record. People hear this quite a bit on the show, but it seems like it's in many organizations, especially some of those that are claiming they're setting up sales enablement functions, is they prize conformity over everything else, compliance to a process. And this idea of building a trust culture where people can try new things, I don't see that very often. I mean, I was fortunate to become up in an organization so that you're given that latitude, you're given enough rope perhaps to hang yourself, but I don't see that very often these days. And I talk to hundreds of companies all the time for this show and others. What's your take on that? I mean, to me, that seems like the biggest impediment. And as a result, I said, I don't see reps really trusting managers. We look at statistics. I forget whose report it was, or the Gallup or somebody, about primary reasons why salespeople leave jobs is their immediate manager. They don't feel they're helping to develop them.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my firsthand experience, Andy, and I've been super lucky because I've worked for, I currently work for an organization that we have a mantra that, hey, if you're not leaving your comfort zone every single day, if you're not doing something every single day that makes you uncomfortable, well, then you're not going to grow. And we kind of exist as like a lot of organizations, as the extended shadow of our founder, Henry Schuck.
Right.
And he's a very direct guy, and he encourages taking risks, and it's okay to mess up, and we rather see you out there trying to figure out where's that edge that you can play next to, as opposed to just conforming and playing it safe like the pack mentality. But I think that's hard. I think that if you don't have the right leadership in place, if you don't have the right immediate boss, then I think that it's hard to kind of come out of your shell that way and take those personal or professional risks. I think that's a part of it. I think the other part of it is, and I know that I've heard in conversations that you and I've had in the past, and listened to some of the other shows on the podcast, which, by the way, I love your podcast.
Thank you.
I think that in the age of technology innovation that we live in, we're sort of squashing out some of that willingness, because everything through technology, and sales technology specifically, everything has become so cadenced, everything has become so structured that it would lead someone to believe that, well, if I just have the right tools and I set the tools up the right way, then that's sort of it. I'm done. That's all I need to do. And so that's just kind of like further inhibits somebody from maybe taking a chance and seeing if that trust is there or not.
Yeah, and so again, we could take this and split it into a lot of different pieces. But I had a conversation with the CRO several months ago where we were talking about growth plans for 2019, and it was all about the process, right? We've got a finely tuned machine at top of funnel. If we just put more inputs in the top of funnel and just follow our process, we're going to grow. And I sort of pushed back and said, well, okay, but by your own admission, you don't have a very successful close rate. I mean, you're closing like 1 out of 5 of your most qualified opportunities. It's a SaaS company. It's not unusual for a SaaS company. So what they do, in my mind, it's not sustainable over a long period of time. But the thought of breaking free of the process and saying, well, how can I help my sellers to close 2 out of every 5 opportunities. And then we'll grow it to 3 out of every 5 opportunities. Just didn't exist for that person. So I see this reflected in management all the time. It's just like, to your point, we've got these tools and they give us a ton of information, and we can see how activities lead to certain outcomes and certain ratios, but we don't think about how we improve the ratios.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that, at least in my experience, and something that we try to do at Discover Org is, if leadership goes first in kind of showing that attempt and even risking and showing the vulnerability to say, like, for instance, we did this exercise last month, and it was just kind of like a 2-hour call blitz. But I mean, everybody from the CEO to every leader of every department, customer facing departments. Sure. I mean, everybody just was on the sales floor with a headset on for 2 hours, banging cold calls. And that's an example of going first where, for sure, I mean, I got hung up on during those 2 hours, and that's not a fun thing. But I'll tell you what it is it's a powerful thing, because when the SDR that just walked in the door last month sees that, hey, nobody's above it all, everybody's in it together, everybody's willing to, pick up that shovel and dig, or whatever your metaphor, and the idea of kind of saying, hey, look at that, I got kicked in the teeth and it didn't kill me. I'm still sitting here, still making those calls. And so I think that if you kind of encourage through leadership and going first and exposing that vulnerability, then you kind of create that invitation to everybody else that says, it's okay to do that here. In fact, we encourage you to do that here.
Yeah, but by the same token, I mean, I would imagine that in perhaps a company like Discover Org and so on, is that, you've got your sales process, well-defined sales process, tech stack, activity metrics that people are sort of being measured against. And what I see, and talking to salespeople all the time, is they feel constrained. Is that they, back to this idea of risk taking, is that's why I learned. I mean, I again was given the latitude in my career by various managers and mentors, is to try something different, something that aligned more closely with what I thought my strengths were, and oftentimes they're revealed to be the case. I would pay the price if it was a risk I took, because I thought that was the only way I could really, be true to myself, be true to my strengths, and succeed. But I don't. Back to statistics, why salespeople are leaving, the lack of development opportunities. To me, that's saying, they're not being given that latitude.
I think that could well be true across a large sample size. And I would say further that, you commented a couple of minutes ago on sort of the SaaS model where, you reach out and you bring stuff into the bucket that falls into the bucket. Maybe that's an okay growth plan for a lot of organizations just trying to find their way. I think that as you mature, and depending on how sophisticated your team and your selling motion becomes, then you're always going to be looking for where's that next level of conversion. And so that's, at a certain point, I think you sort of break away from the order taking end of the spectrum. Hey, Andy's shopping for something like what I'm selling, and therefore, great. I want to go get Andy's business first. So tell me where those leads are at. I'll prioritize those. I'll win those. Okay, great. If you've got that kind of battened down, then I think there's another tier that's like not so much, the buyer that's ready to buy, but the idea of the other end of the spectrum, which is true persuasion, taking somebody that, maybe was thinking A until they got the phone call from you, and now they're thinking B. And so you actually created a whole tier of wins that maybe weren't even gettable before because of playing it safe or just following the system or just conforming. Like, you're not going to get that next tier of leads that you persuaded into wins.
Right. So how do you build this culture of trust? Because you've really hit on it. To me, this is, as I think about it, it's obviously it starts at the top with any sort of cultural initiative. I wrote earlier this week about the difference between a sales culture and a selling culture.
Yeah, I saw that.
We seem like we have a real emphasis on selling culture these days as opposed to a buyer-centric sales culture. And I think that plays sort of into the trust aspect of it. How do you how do you build that? What are the first steps? I mean, I know you have to, CEO has to be bought into it, but maybe even what's the steps you take to get your CEO to buy into that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was lucky to have walked into a situation where it wasn't just the founder and CEO that sort of set the pace for that, but it was also that early cadre of sellers that, years later are still with the organization, still atop the leaderboard. And so just like a really firmly entrenched, group of, original gangsters that are still getting it done at Discover Org. And so I think that having the right people on the team, there's not, if you're mired in politics and you're mired in drama, you're not going to ever get there. But if you have good people that are just open and willing to teach and show the newer folks kind of what they've learned, and hey, let me save you some time. You can take 6 months learning this, or I can just lay it out for you right now. And so, something like role play, right? I'm still a big fan. Mm-hmm. The way I grew up learning sales was, everybody bring your lunch into the conference room, and we'll kick the crap out of each other, and we'll get some black eyes, but boy, will we be ready when it's for real on the phone with actual prospects. And so I think that those are some things, once again, though, it comes back to exactly where we were a couple minutes ago. It's leadership has to give that permission and encourage that trying muscle, and create forums for that to be the case. A weekly role play, lunch and learns. We have some of the old guard at Discover Org perfectly willing, despite all the success that they've had. They're not somehow above it all. They'll stay 2 hours late if they can get in a conference room with a group of new SDRs and teach them the ropes a little bit. And so it's just this real pervasive learning culture where there's a real sense of brotherhood on the team, and therefore I think it starts with the CEO and the early leaders.
Well, and there's a connection there too, which is that if the goal is I want to enable my sellers to be effective in whatever dimensions you want to measure, is that starts with hiring the right people. And this idea about looking for values over value, or values and character, is for me an essential one, because that's people talk about sports cliches. We hire the best available athlete, yada yada yada. But I think it's really underlooked at or underused, this idea of saying, okay, well, how do I test for values and character? How do I make sure I get the right people? And to your point, that politics aren't an issue with them, just there to learn and improve, and they feel like they're coming into an environment where that is rewarded. How do you screen people for that?
Obviously there's questions that I know that we try to ask. I try to ask candidates in an interview, and a lot of the questions that get to that character, it's not about asking someone to tell me about their highlight reel. It's asking them to tell me about your most abysmal failures. Like, tell me when some stuff didn't work out. Tell me when adversity knocked you down. I want to hear what you did. What did you learn? How did you come out of that? What did you do differently after that? And so I think that if you kind of take it to the perhaps negative side of the ledger, you're gonna be able to reveal someone's character a lot more accurately, in something like an interview process, a lot more accurately than if you're just staying on the positive side and asking them about all the things that have gone great for them and their shiniest moments.
Well, I think you have to ask the unexpected questions there that serve as you get an example is, can they show the vulnerability? Can they show they were coachable? Can they, do they really learn the lesson of it? Something that they wouldn't necessarily have practiced before coming in.
Yeah, you got to hit them with something they didn't expect. And I think another big piece in all this, Andy, is just the, most problems. I would say in the workplace, outside the workplace, with prospects, with customers, most failures end up being failures of communication, right? And so if you buy that idea, and I do very much, then I think that you really have to watch the kind of communication within the company. And, like Discover Org, because everybody's just so blunt and direct with one another, it's not a big deal for us to sort of call bullshit on one another. Like for instance, most sellers would say that they're pretty good at listening, but they're not. They're horrible at listening. They're in the advice giving business. They're in the waiting to talk next whenever the other person shuts up business. but they're not in the listening business. And similarly, if I take a group of managers, most managers think, oh, I'm pretty good at coaching. It's like, well, no, you're not good at coaching. You're good at moralizing. You're good at warning. You're good at directing. You're good at jumping too quickly to the advice piece of it.
Right.
But so I think that it takes an honest bunch to kind of just call bullshit on one another, and at the same time not take yourselves too seriously. Move and advance and grow, but kind of get over yourself a little bit too.
Yeah, so if sort of sales manager listening to this, or a frontline sales manager, let's even say, it's thinking, okay, well, that sounds good. Maybe I don't have the CEO enrolled, but is that something I can implement, within my team?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of resources out there, right? So I happen to have a next door neighbor who is a psychiatrist, and so him and I are talking at a birthday party, and he starts telling me about this motivational interviewing technique that is kind of the de facto standard for behavioral psychologists and behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he suggested this book, and I start reading this book, and sure enough, it's a layup for sales. Like anybody that's in sales needs to learn about motivational interviewing, because it's the stuff that we're talking about. It's pay attention to yourself as a listener, and show the person on the other side that you get them and that you understand what they're trying to share with you, and that you can repeat it back to them, and that you're not, you can resist the urge to just jump on the advice giving side of things.
Mm-hmm.
You can just be quiet for a while and be the listener. And that's a real powerful thing with prospects, with customers, with coworkers.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Motivational Interviewing, and the author's last name, I believe, is Miller. But it's if you just go on Amazon, Motivational Interviewing, it's like the Bible of cognitive behavioral therapists. So it'll be the first book that pops up.
All right, it's on my list.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. So if we're saying, the topic is how do we enable our sellers to become more effective, you've identified several key things. One is got to build an environment of trust, and which is absolutely true, which to me is leading into we have to build an environment of risk-taking, and that's okay. I mean, some people call that acceptance of failure, or fast failing, or whatever. To me, it's risk-taking. I mean, you can't do these other things unless you because the object of taking a risk is not to fail quickly; it's to learn quickly. The result may be a failure. You'll learn from a failure. It may be a partial success, but so risk-taking. I always come back to this sort of ideas that development or enablement is really a shared responsibility between the individual and the organization. And I see in the work that I do that it's hard to get people to invest their time, invest their money, because they sort of think the company should do it. And we sort of have to, as an industry, as a profession, sort of say, look, that's just not going to happen, right? To the extent that it should happen, companies just don't invest that time. I've pushed the wet noodle up the hill on this for years. And I think we have to sort of train our sellers to, if you enter this profession, if you're going to work for us in our organization, we're going to set an expectation that you're investing some of your time and effort and possibly even money to, maybe we'll subsidize some of that, to grow on your own.
I mean, and the folks out there that are internally motivated, they'll take right to that. I don't love it as a strategy across a large group of sellers or of anyone else, because in my experience, it's rarer to be internally motivated than to not be, and therefore I wouldn't want to put all my eggs in that basket. So we're talking about this permission to fail, and I think that's kind of like that's the sexy way to dress it up. Permission to fail. What we're really saying is that I need you to try. I need those attempts. Okay, yes, it's okay to fail. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll succeed, but if I reduce it down to the lowest common denominator, what I'm really saying is I need you to deliberately practice. I need you to get to the gym, and I need you to get to the gym often to deliberately practice. And that's something that at Discover.org, when we only launched our enablement function at the beginning of 2018. This was after we did an acquisition in the summer of 17, and the team got to a size where we kind of said, okay, we better start taking enablement seriously and really care about that and take care of that function. So it's still pretty new, but one of the early learnings that I came upon in trying to build it was it's hard and unnatural for a successful group of sellers to think that going to the gym and training is an important part of it. Like DiscoverOrg is a company that's been successful for a long while here. And so you can get accustomed to getting by on your talent and your success, and the scoreboard says you're doing a good job. But once again, where's that next level then? Well, that next level has to come from trying some things differently, which is to say, trying some things at all, practicing, deliberately practicing. So that's that's kind of the drum that I've been beating to the team, and everybody's kind of bought in. But in a busy day, just like it's easy for a sales manager to agree in the abstract that more coaching is a good thing, but then what's the first thing that they don't do in a busy day? Well, they don't do coaching because, well, I'm over here with my important numbers, or I'm trying to hit my month, and I'm not belittling those things. I'm just saying that any old excuse will do if I'm looking to say, oh, I didn't quite get to the coaching today. So I think the same thing is true in a busy environment, in a hard charging sales team. It's super easy to kind of give yourself an excuse for why you didn't have time to get to the gym and practice today. And yet I think that's the sine qua non of finding that next level. So it's a culture of trust. It's open communication and vulnerability, and it's kind of beating the stick on deliberate practice.
Okay, so you may win the award for first Latin phrase used on the show. So let me ask a question. So in your organization, how are managers incentivized, and how are they measured for developing the capabilities of the individuals that report to them?
Well, we're working on that. That's not. I'd be lying to you if I said that was nailed down. I think our best practice today suggests that if you take a look at sales enablement, you can't really prove causation, but you can prove correlation. And so
sure.
we have, we've purchased a number of tools, enablement tools in our tech stack, and for each one of those tools, we have like a number of behaviors that we're trying to model and encourage. And so we measure different activities to see if this or that seller, or when I say sales, it's also our account managers, our customer success team, retention, upsell, the whole group, anybody that's revenue facing. We measure them based on, are they using these tools that we believe correlate with higher win rates, higher average selling prices, and these desirable outcomes for the business. And we're hoping that those that are willing and active participants in these enablement behaviors will in fact achieve the business outcomes that are going to make them more money, going to help the company to grow faster. So that's really how we're trying to do it, both at the management level and the enablement function. Our learning and development function is a piece of that. Our product marketing team is a part of that. It kind of traverses a number of functions, but when it all shakes out, what we're trying to do is say, hey, if you do these things of enablement, that's going to correlate with you being a more successful version of yourself. And that's kind of how we're drawing it up.
So to that end is then, do the individual sellers on your team, and again, not picking on you, just you happen to be sitting here, do they each have a development plan, an individual development plan, so they know, hey, over the course of calendar 2019, this is where I started, this is where I want to be, and these are the tools, this is the things I need to learn, the way I need to be educated to get me from here to there?
Yes-ish. There's kind of two different flavors of it, right? So let me lay them both down. The first is at DiscoverOrg, we try to be pretty conscientious, and we continue to improve and iterate on this idea of mapping the career trajectory and the career possibilities. So if I come in the door as an inbound SDR, then what's sort of the benchmark for when I get to a chance to be an outbound SDR? And then if I'm an outbound SDR, about how long does it typically take for me to earn the ability to become an account executive?
Mm-hmm.
Account executive, all right, I'm on the SMB team. What's it like to be one of those enterprise guys, and what kind of milestones do I have to hit? So I think that we're doing a better and better job every quarter, every year at sort of laying out the roles and the trajectories and all the different, like the decision tree of, we have a lot of
Sure.
people that, hey, I come in on the sales side, but then I actually find that I like dealing with existing customers, so I might flip over to there, or there's lots of transition, right? But I think that the duty that we first try to satisfy is mapping out what that can look like, because everybody wants to feel themselves improving and progressing, and everybody wants to be able to have this palatable sense of, my career is continually better off. I'm getting somewhere. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The completely a different way of coming at that is, as it relates to everybody and having an individual plan, is we try to take a look at, well, what are like the important buckets of learning, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm a seller, okay, well, number one, I probably have to be pretty good at discovery, and that's both asking questions as well as being an active listener. I probably have to be, I have to have some kind of negotiation game. I probably have to have some skills as a storyteller in kind of casting vision and narrative. And so we kind of take these big areas of learning, and we try to put stuff out there as an enablement team, as a product marketing team, as a learning and development team. We try to put content and training and coaching out there that allows folks to kind of gravitate towards, within a prescribed realm of choice, mm-hmm. what's interesting to you. If you're somebody that's already a whiz at math, all right, well then maybe you might find some of the negotiation stuff a bore, but boy, you could stand to tell a better story. And so I would gravitate towards that, versus somebody else might be, hey man, I was an English major, I'm pretty good at telling stories, but my math is pretty weak. And so I might gravitate towards that negotiation. And so there's this kind of this realm of prescribed choice, and that then becomes kind of the development plan at an individual level. So you have kind of the role-based stuff, and then you kind of have the subject matter-based
mm-hmm.
Considerations.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I what I sort of see is that, which you're further along than many companies in this, is what's missing still, though, is some sort of, maybe it's annual assessment, but on a way to assess where I stand in these critical skills and get people committed to specific learning activities, whether it's through internally provided content or externally, to just sort of fill those gaps. It's correlation based, right? That we don't have a lot of data on the effectiveness of anything in sales, really, which is unfortunate. But where I see companies that are succeeding is they get it's not just a career path. So it may, in parallel with that career path we're defined for you, which, the opportunities are really based on your achievements, is it's a combination of achievement and learning. I mean, I see salespeople, it's like, take this conundrum we always hear about, top sellers that aren't going to be good managers. Yeah, for me, when I look at that, this is what I see is that people just aren't learning what they need to learn to become a good manager. It's not they can't be, is that they sort of think by virtue of having achieved a quantity of things or a certain level in sales, that somehow now they're qualified for that next. And it's like, yeah, we don't pair the achievement with the education.
Yeah, I mean, that's the default though, right? That's
mm-hmm.
kind of, I think that, at least in my experience, that's how most companies seem to do it. Our push within the last year is we feel that the leverage in the equation is at the manager level. And
mm-hmm.
so, and it's not through bad intention. So if I take a look at us, everybody's running fast and running hard, and everybody's busy, and you're trying to get a lot of stuff done and competing priorities and all this and that. But we were kind of saying to our management levels of management, managers and directors on the sales and customer success side, we were kind of, not exactly pounding our fist on the table and saying, do more coaching, but we were encouraging doing more coaching. But then it dawned upon us that, well, we never really taught anybody how to coach somebody. So once again, even, just like the guy that or gal that achieves sales success, that's not necessarily who you give the manager opportunity to. Similarly, to just say, go forth and coach and not show someone how to coach, you're bound to just have people vomiting advice all over the place and being like, oh, I'm this great coach. So we've kind of gotten very serious recently about, let's have a methodology around how we coach people. And let's first start with our layer of leaders. And let's teach our leaders how to be great coaches, because only if we kind of take, that's the other thing with enablement at Discover.org, is that we very much champion this idea, this sort of grassroots idea that says it can't just be, some folks that wear an enablement hat telling everybody how to get better. It has to come from the people that everybody wants to emulate. It has to come from the top sellers and the top folks at renewing existing business. Like, that's who everybody wants to be when they grow up. And so we all have to be ambassadors of this idea of self-development and improvement. And but the point is, through no bad intention did we want bad coaching happening. It's just that we never really thought, oh, wait a second, we never taught anybody how to coach. Maybe we better double back for that. But I think, sort of the train the trainer model, if you empower that leadership cadre, that's where I think you can get a lot done in a scalable way around some of these behaviors that we're talking about. I don't think it can ever just emanate from like a training or enablement function. I don't think there'll be buy-in.
Yeah, well, several points on that, because it's, to me, great, you teach people how to coach. Maybe we have time, we'll come back and talk about that, because I think in general in sales, we inaccurately define what coaching is and what it should be. But it really starts with, to a point you alluded to earlier, which is, and this is part of a cultural thing, is managers believe that, a relative sense of a ranking of importance, coaching, development, serve, if I have time, I get to it. And so I run a book club program with companies. We sit and talk with them, prescribe a list of 10 books they should read over 12 months, and we do some guided conversations and so on. And in selling this program, the biggest pushback we get is from sales managers saying, well, we don't have time for that. And it's like, oh, really? Because what I stipulate is, if you want me to help you with this, is you have to commit to setting aside 20 minutes every day. In the day, all work stops. We're just going to learn during that 20 minutes. And managers are horrified. I can't do that. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at the math. Your reps are only spending 30% of their time interacting with the prospects anyway. That number has been consistent for decades. And I get people pitching to come on this show all the time to talk about how they're going to break that. We're going to get more time for the reps to sell. And it just never changes, right? So, of course you have time. You have time. And just think of the message that sends to your sales team. We say, look, this is so important. We're going to stop activity for 20 minutes, and we're all going to sit down, and we're going to read for 15 minutes. We're going to journal about to reflect on what we just read. Over the course of a year, the sales team reads 10 books they would never have read. And they're, X amount smarter about the profession they're in and the way they interact with buyers and build relationships, all those things. So to me, this is one thing culturally has to be set up, is that you have time. You have time. You may not feel like you do, but you have time. And it has to be prioritized to do that. The other thing which we talk about with coaching is so much of coaching these days, and this is, again, the definition part of it, is coaching is deal coaching, opportunity coaching. And so I encourage companies to look at three ways, you've got managing, coaching, mentoring. So manage the process, coach the opportunities, mentor the people. And very simple way to look at it. And I think if more companies sort of embrace this sort of paradigm, is you'd find that, we're really not doing much mentoring of our people. We're doing the coaching. We're doing the deal opportunity coaching, because as managers, as your point earlier, we love to give advice, right? This is what you should be doing, as opposed to saying, well, how can I help this person reach the next level?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that where my head goes, first of all, I love that reflection piece. That's I believe, at least as an individual learner, my best learning moments come when I sort of take a step back from everything, look at some notes, from the past week, or sort of reflect. They kind of say, well, what am I better doing? Am I better taking like 5 more demos as an account exec? Or am I better, taking those couple of hours that 5 demos would have consumed, and kind of cordon that off for reflection and learning? And I think there's research that shows pretty convincingly that it's the latter approach that's going to lead to breakthroughs.
Yeah, that's how you integrate that knowledge into.
Right. Yeah. So you have to take that time, and you have to reflect, and then also in the sort of the coaching mentoring aspect of it, I feel like what you really need to do is it's that whole teach a man to fish, right? You need to help them help themselves. So it's not about giving out the advice and having the answer, as much as having sort of a methodology for encouraging self-reflection and critical thought. Well, what do you think you should do? What do you think the problem is, Andy? Well,
exactly.
Do you have any suggestions on, how you might get out of this jam? Okay, great. Come back to me with 3 of those, and then tell me which one you think is the best alternative, and tell me why. And it's just like so you're trying to you're trying to teach them something that they can use all the time to be self-reliant and self-correcting, as opposed to, you don't want to encourage this dependency of like, hey, everybody pops out of their chair and goes and asks for the answer. Like, that's not scalable.
No, I mean, the manager's not always the smartest person in the room, and the sooner you acknowledge that, the better. And what's really what you're describing, and what I believe with the mentoring process, it's you're sort of being a psychologist. I'm sure in motivational interviewing we'll find this, is that you're leading people to discover and define the problem and suggest the solutions that would work with them. So you're really uncovering what the problem is, and then to your right point is, well, what do you think? What would you do in this situation? As opposed to being trying to show yourself to be the smartest person in the room.
Well, here's the kick in the head there is, if not to turn this into like a promo for that book, Motivational Interviewing, but the great thing about it is that you start reading this thing and you realize, wait a minute, the way that we deal with each other internally, this is no different. It's the same exact way that we need to deal with prospective customers of ours.
Oh, sure.
We need to hear. We need to be a good listener. We need to understand what their challenges are in their role, and then we need to kind of show how we can help solve those challenges. But the whole book, Motivational Interviewing, it's about moving people off of this ambivalence, because most people, when it comes to ambivalence, it's like, well, I think of some reasons to make a change, then I think of some reasons not to make a change, then I just get tired of thinking and I walk away from the whole thing. So it's like it's a textbook for moving people away from ambivalence. So it's as applicable internally as it is externally.
Yeah, and it gives me, for people that want to look at by William R. Miller, Motivational Interviewing, Helping People Change. And I think a good companion book people should look at is a book that the title has coaching, but it's really about mentoring. It's a book called The Coaching Habit.
Michael Bungay Stanier. That's the one we're reading, yeah.
That's a great book, and extremely jealous of the fact it's such a good book. And
he says you don't even need 20 minutes a day; you only need 10 minutes.
Yeah, but as a manager, I mean, he lays out a recipe for how you engage and how you walk through this process. I haven't read Motivational Interviewing. It sounds like it probably has similar content.
Pretty similar.
And if you're a manager and you're thinking, okay, how do I really coach? I'm going to call it mentoring, because to me, I want you to separate coaching into your opportunity coaching. It's valuable. You want to do it. But you should use some of the same techniques when you do opportunity coaching as you do with development mentoring. It gives you a recipe, a step-by-step recipe with great rationalization or rationale for why you should do it and why it works. So, go buy those books if you're a frontline manager.
Yeah, they're very good.
All right. Well, we sort of run out of time, but we could keep on going on this for forever, but it's been fascinating. And tell folks how they can get in touch with you.
Well, first of all, Andy, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Yeah. You can check us out at www.discoverorg.com, and got lots of folks that love to jump into a conversation with you and hear about what some of your challenges are with data and with prioritizing your selling day and figuring out who to go after and how best to go after them. And that's, we're we're kind of purists in that we're providers as well as practitioners ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I think there's a real authenticity to how we kind of come at it and how we're willing to share what we've learned and, the punches in the face that we've taken and kind of how we've responded.
Excellent. Good. Yeah. I mean, we've had, I guess you're now president, Katie Bullard, on the show. We talked about the research you guys did with Steve Martin, which was a great report as well. If people want to go back and listen to that episode, because I referenced that research report quite often because I thought it was very insightful. So, all right. Well, David, thanks a lot. And we'll look forward to talking again soon.
Take care, Andy.
All right. Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for this week. First of all, as always, I want to thank you for joining me. Also want to thank my guest, David Sill. That's easy for me to say. Be sure to join me again next week as my guest will be Stacey Brown Randall. She's the author of a book titled Generating Business Referrals Without Asking. And Stacey and I will be talking about how to generate new leads through referrals and why Stacey believes that if you are asking for referrals, you're doing something wrong. So make sure you check that out with us next week. Before you go, don't forget, check out the Sales House. That's your all-in-one sales growth accelerator for B2B sellers just like you. Visit thesaleshouse.com. Thanks again for joining me. Until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.